I'm just as addicted to the casino and to the perks and to the hotel and to the diamond lounges. I'm just as addicted to that as I was to the gambling. Every single day off I had, that's not an exaggeration. For 4 years that I lived in New York, every single day off that I had, I was either in Atlantic City or I was at the Queens Casino, the Aqueduct Casino in Queens, every day off.
Today's guest is Adam Lyons. He tells his story of gambling addiction and recovery. Adam struggled with gambling addiction all across the country as he moved multiple times, trying to fix something in his life, not realizing that the gambling was the problem. But before we dive into his story, I have one favor to ask from you. So many of you watch this channel regularly, but you're not yet subscribed. If you could do me the favor of smashing that subscribe button right now, my promise to you in return is that I'll continue to work hard each and every day to prove that gambling addiction is real, but help is out there. Adam, for people that don't know you yet, they haven't seen your podcast yet, what's a little bit about yourself just to get us started?
Yeah, a little bit about myself. I was born and raised in central Massachusetts, Clinton, Mass. I grew up with a family, actually a half of a family of gamblers. My mom's side of the family, a lot of gamblers. My uncle Rick was teaching me, God rest his soul, he was teaching me how to play craps with a Monopoly board against the couch on my grandmother's house when I was 9 years old. I can remember that vividly, and I can remember just that moment and that feeling of watching the dice. And I was hooked. Growing up at Christmas when all my cousins were waiting for Santa, I was trying to get in the nickel dime poker game in the kitchen. And that kind of throughout high school, it kind of took a break because you're in high school and you're playing sports and you're doing stuff and you're keeping busy. But once I got to college, which was right around the poker boom, that is when at the time I didn't realize I had a problem, but started playing poker 5-6 nights a week. I was at UMass Amherst for the first 2 years of my college. And yeah, just from there, it just kind of gradually progressed. And I ended up, not really finding help until I was 38. So I for 20 years, I gambled just recklessly, leading a double life. Casinos was my main thing. There were times in the 20 years where I signed myself out of a casino. So now I'm going to play Keno every day. Keno closes at 1. So now I need to drive to Atlantic City at 1 in the morning. So, I mean, I got stories for days, but I mean, that's just the gist of it was, on the outside, a lot of people probably maybe thought that I gambled a little bit, but nobody knew, the depths of my addiction. Even I didn't know, for many years.
You mentioned this poker boom, and I know what it is, so we're going to dive into it maybe a little bit to give context to the audience. But what I think the poker boom was like then is like what's happening now with slot influencers. It's just like this mass acceptance of a thing that used to be kind of unacceptable.
Oh.
For those that don't really know what it was, like, could you just describe what was the poker boom and how did it get you to gamble more?
Sure. Yeah. So I can remember freshman year of college, we would be playing poker and, we're playing $5, $10. And then, so the World Series of Poker, it started getting televised on ESPN. I want to say 2001, 2002. And Robert Varconi, that is a deep track. He won, I think, the 2002 World Series of Poker, the year before Moneymaker. And me and my roommates were like, oh my God, we would be playing Queen 10 offsuit and calling it the Varconi. But so Chris Moneymaker was this guy in 2003 who won a $45 satellite, and he parlayed that into winning the main event. And so it was just this big thing with ESPN, $45 and you can win millions. And then at that time, online poker was legal. So Party Poker, Paradise Poker, all these online poker sites, they have these satellites every day for a penny or free roll, right? You can enter a free roll, free tournament. But what they don't tell you is if you win this tournament and beat 10,000 people, then that gets you into the next tournament where you got to beat 5,000, then 1,000, then this. It's not going to happen, right? But they sell that dream. Just like now, like you said, I'm so glad you brought this up off the jump. These guys, these influencers, these YouTubers, they're funny, they're charismatic. They make it seem like it's totally possible. To me, it's worse than Jamie Foxx being on MGM saying $5 gets you 200. Because these guys are real people, right? They're showing, and then the casinos, they're complicit. They're letting them film. When I worked for MGM 5 years ago, a guy couldn't take his phone out at the poker table. Now they're letting them roll the dice and follow the dice with a camera. I mean, it's just and what is a 17-year-old, 18-year-old kid supposed to think when they watch these?
Right. I'm probably the same thing you thought when you and your friends were watching the World Series of Poker. I
Yeah,
want that to be me.
I'm the
I
next
want to be
moneymaker.
that.
I'm the next moneymaker, baby. Yeah.
Exactly. So
Oh,
now let's take us back then. So you're in freshman year of college, sophomore year of college, you're watching these with your friends, you're playing poker more. How does the gambling start to progress in your life?
yeah. So the gambling started to progress once I realized that I didn't want to do anything else besides play poker. I can remember my roommate, he got a girlfriend and they started going to parties off campus. And for me, if I could even get a 3-person tournament down in the common room, I would much rather do that. Right.
Mhm.
And then I started going home and, my friends who, we would always either go to the bars or we would go do something. Now I'm always trying to get my home friends to play poker. And that's the thing too about being a compulsive gambler is you eventually have your friends and then you have like your gambling friends, right? And so that's when I started having two sets of friends where I had my friends that I grew up with that we would all do normal things, and then I would have these different pockets of people that I would gamble with and play poker with. So 2 years after doing this, I ended up taking a year off and I was down at Foxwoods in Connecticut one night, and a lot of people get a fake ID to go drink. I got a fake ID so I could go to Foxwoods. And I was 20 years old and I was playing blackjack. And I was talking to the dealer and he was telling me how, yeah, they had a rough week this week. They only made $22 an hour. And this was back in 2003, 2004. And I'm like, $22 an hour? Like, sign me up.
Mhm.
And he's like, well, the poker room, blah, 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 they're hiring. So long story short, I end up taking a year and a half and I worked at Foxwoods as a poker dealer at 20, 21 years old. And from there, I start meeting people that are also, unfortunately, a large majority of the people that work in the industry are also compulsive gamblers. And so
Mhm.
we started doing, of course, if you're not familiar, Mohegan Sun is 10 minutes down the road. So we would get out of work, go to Mohegan Sun. This is pre-recession. So as a 21-year-old kid, I could get a $5,000 credit card like nothing.
Mhm.
I ended up maxing out 3 $5,000 credit cards over the course of a couple of years. And so now I went from playing poker to now I love the casino, right? I love the machines. My game back then, I used to love playing Caribbean stud, 3-card poker, all the worst games that you can play. And then my value for the dollar just went out the window, right? Like it's one thing if you're playing poker with your friends in college and you're losing 5-10 bucks, like what's the most you can do? But when you're doing a cash advance on a
Yeah.
credit card at 21 years old and you're paying a 25% fee off the jump and then the interest is just so that's when after doing that for years it was like I think I was 28 or 29. I ended up having to declare bankruptcy. I had $30,000 in debt, the majority of it coming from gambling.
Wow. And I mean, that happens it's up and down, I imagine, over the course of that 6, 7 years, where it's like, when you're doing it, are you convincing yourself that you're becoming like a professional poker player on the side?
Great question. So to be honest, I never thought I was going to be a professional.
Mm.
I was that gambler who just one time, baby, one time. Like I just thought that I was going to hit that progressive Royal on Caribbean stud. I thought I was going to go on the run of all runs playing craps or playing roulette. I was a dreamer. I was in the 12-step meetings, the dream world of a compulsive gambler. I'll never forget that first night that I went into a 12-step meeting and I read that for the first time. I thought I was being pranked. Like that is me.
Mm.
The dream world, right? And then I would always think, and it's so sad, my mother's parents who were compulsive gamblers, God rest their souls, they were the same way. They would always say, when I win, I'm going to give you money and give you money and I'm going to take care of everybody. I was the same way. Like there
Yeah.
were some Christmases where if I had a good week, my parents and my family, they were getting $300 in a card rather than 50. But, on Christmases that it was bad, they're getting a $50 Target gift card that I paid with a credit card.
I can really relate to that because I can remember one Christmas where I had like just lost a bunch of money. And this was pretty late into the gambling for me. And I got like, I think I'm like kind of like a funny guy sometimes. So I was looking for like a pun to kind of give as a gift. And so I got each of my family members like an item from the grocery store. And I wrote on like a $1 bill, I wrote on like a $1 bill whatever the pun was. It was like a bag of apples for my mom. And I said like, "You're the apple of my eye," or something like that. So like, dude, I know the exact
Yeah,
feeling of
I'm
just like,
not broke, mom. I'm just a comedian. This is funny, right?
exactly,
It's the
exactly.
thought.
Let's push that aside. You know, I'll see if I can find a picture and throw it in on
Oh, that's
the
good.
edit when we get there. But I just get that. It's like I think a lot of gamblers will have this idea that a big win can solve all the problems you're building up, no matter what you're doing to the people around you. It can always be kind of redeemed after you finally get that dream goal that you're going to hit. What happens in the months that follow this period of bankruptcy? Do you stop gambling? Does it begin to get better? Like what happens next?
Going back a little bit, so I can remember being in my parents' kitchen, sitting at my dad's kitchen table, and we just kind of, without knowing, we kind of did a pressure relief group meeting where I just laid out all my bills. I laid out what I had stopped paying. At this point, I couldn't even pay my car payment. Everything was out of control, and I'll never forget. Now my dad, great with money. He's a retired firefighter. He's never had an issue with money. He's always been able to gamble responsibly. I'll never forget. He looked at me. He's like, "I cannot believe I'm saying this to my son, but you, bankruptcy is like your only way out. Like there's nothing else to do." Now,
Mhm.
fast forward 15 years, we know that like that's the worst thing a compulsive gambler can do is take a bailout like that. But at the moment, obviously, none of us knew. So I did that, and the shame and embarrassment and the guilt that I felt. I didn't gamble for like months, maybe 3 or 4 months, and I can remember in that moment thinking, well, yeah, lesson learned. I can't buy a house for 7 years. I can't even get a Macy's card if I wanted to. And so I'm all done, right? And then 3, 4 months later, the dust settles. You get your first offer in the mail for a credit one $500 credit card. You start getting paychecks, and then the disease starts working the justifications. Well, you were young and stupid. You're not going to do cash advances. Like just budget, right? Just we'll go to the casino once a month, $300. Leave the debit card at home, and we'll go from there. So I try that, right? And then maybe it worked that first time, but then you go home and you're like, all right, 300 is obviously not enough. So let me take 600 this time. Okay. And then, oh, how'd that get in there? How'd that debit card get in there? Right. And then it just, before you know it, I'm back in the same spot. And so to answer your question, at this point, once I realized, holy shit, like, oh, can I swear? Yeah.
Yeah.
So once I realized, holy shit, like I can't stop. I wasn't ready to admit that I had a problem, but now this is when the disease takes over. And now the justifications and the planning, and they're like, well, we can't stay here because everybody's judging us here, right? So let's get out of Dodge. And you know what? Let's move to New York City. A lot of stuff to do there. You want to do comedy, you want to do other things. That's what's going to happen. So, starting right around when I was 29, 30, that was the second of 3 acts of my gambling where I just said, I just got to get out of Clinton. I just got to get out of Mass. And so I moved to New York City. And I lived in Brooklyn, worked in Manhattan. I was there for over 4 years. And honestly, like a lot of stuff that I wanted to accomplish, I did. I took some improv classes at UCB, Upright Citizens Brigade. It was amazing. I met some great people. I had a great job where I was managing a bar, but I now am 2 hours away from Atlantic City. I'll never forget. It was St. Patrick's Day of, I think it was 2011. The first St. Patrick. I had moved to New York in early March. St. Patrick's Day. Me and my buddy went down to AC. We took the Greyhound, which you want to be depressed, take the Greyhound out of Port Authority
Yeah.
on St. Patrick's Day. And but once I got there, and because it has, I'll say one thing about Atlantic City. It's underrated. I mean, it's Atlantic City, but like, for a gambler, it's pretty good. And because I'm just as addicted to the casino and to the perks and to the hotel and to the diamond lounges. I'm just as addicted to that as I was to the gambling. So once that happens, every single day off I had, that's not an exaggeration. For 4 years that I lived in New York, every single day off that I had, I was either in Atlantic City or I was at the Queens Casino, the Aqueduct Casino in Queens.
I think I had a similar experience in terms of like wanting to change location.
Mm.
I think that in my case, and maybe it was the same for you, I like realized something was wrong when I was feeling depressed, anxious, like confused of what to do next. But I never thought like, yeah, maybe it's because you're losing all this money gambling.
Oh, of
Like
course.
it was just like, oh, I must hate Washington D.C. That's where I was living. I'll go to Australia. So was there some of that maybe? It's less just like not
Yeah.
thinking about the gambling itself.
Yeah, and I should say this actually. I can remember um I want to say it was like after the bankruptcy before I went to New York, me and my buddy actually went to one 12-step meeting
Mhm.
in Massachusetts. And I remember I went as a because for me, my gambling, I was not in the shadows. I was out in the open. And towards the end, the last 5 years of my gambling, I used my problem as a negotiating ploy to get money from people, right? Like I pulled at their heartstrings, said I'm going to go to GA, I'm going to get help. I just need this last 500 for my rent as I'm sitting at a slot machine, broke, right? But I actually went to one GA meeting in like 2009, 2010. I can remember being in there. I can remember being touched by people's stories.
Mhm.
And I can remember sharing my story. And then me and my buddy left and we went and played Keno. So
Right.
like I just wasn't ready, right? And to answer your question, at this point I can remember sitting on my couch in New York City. I can remember a moment where I was like, hold on. So maybe I do seriously need help. Like I just went the last I can't remember the last time I did anything besides gamble on my days off, right? And so now it's not my disease that's telling me need to leave New York. It's me under a pile of rubble in the back of my brain being like, dude, this is not, we can't do this. We can't do this, right? And so eventually around 2015, and it was because, I was living with a couple of roommates. One of them was moving, the other was moving in with a girlfriend. So it was like, get a studio apartment in Brownsville, Brooklyn for 2 grand a month, or, move back to Mass. And so I ended up moving back to Mass. And that is when I very quickly, once again, not ready to admit that I have a problem, not ready to actually, I would admit that I had a problem, but not ready to stop.
Mhm.
And so I started these half hearted attempts at stopping. And I signed myself out. I signed the self exclusion list at Foxwoods and Mohegan in 2016.
Was there ever a point up until that point maybe where you were gambling and it was like normal?
I'm trying to, I mean, my initial answer is absolutely not, but I'm trying to give myself an ounce of credit if I ever gambled normally. I would say the only time I ever gambled normally was when I was with people. The problem was I would say even though I was out and I wasn't hiding my gambling,
Mhm.
I would say 80% of my gambling was done alone. Me being on that Greyhound bus alone for the 2 a.m. Greyhound to get down to AC. Me sitting in a convenience store, me and two other guys in their 80s, like at that lonely little table in the middle of a 7-Eleven watching the TV screen of a Keno. I mean, that was me at like 28 years old. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's just, it's when I think back to it, it's just wild. But I would say, yeah, the only time I would gamble normally if I was with people and we had plans. But even then, right? Like if I'm going out to the bar and we're playing Keno, my friends are playing 20, I'm playing 60, and then I say I'm going to the bathroom, and then I play another 60. And then when the bill comes, actually, I only had that, and that, so I'm going to give you $25. Like, what a scumbag. You know what I
I
mean?
know the
Like,
feeling. I know the feeling.
oh, man.
Yeah. What I was trying to get at with that question is just like the progression of it all because you talk about being 9 years old playing craps with your grandfather and just feeling like this is really cool, like I really like this, and then all of a sudden now we flash forward a couple decades and it's become a compulsion to the point where you're riding a bus at 2 in the morning to go to Atlantic City, not to come back. And so I'm just trying for the audience to just explain that progression because now I know that we're going to be heading into the final third of your story and we're going to be
Hmm.
talking about how it kind of spiraled out. you know What happened when you got back to Mass after living in New York?
With Atlantic City, don't get me wrong. When I'm on that bus, as an addict, I've always had like racing thoughts, right? And so like when I'm on that bus, there's one thought that's like, here we go. This is the trip. This is the trip. I got a plan. I'm going to do craps. If I lose 300 in craps, we're going to a Keno slot. We're going to grind it out. I'm going to hit 8 out of 8. That's my new thing now. I'm going to do eight spots, not four, not five,
Mm,
right? And then there's another thought that races through and says, turn around, like get off the bus and get back on the bus. Like you said, it's a compulsion. And towards the end, when it was so bad in New York, I had those thoughts. But then, I, I try to explain it on the modern meeting, and I try to explain it to people. The disease, the disease, the disease, the disease. It's not a cop out. All I can tell you is that I'm there, but I am not driving the bus, right? The disease is driving the bus. The disease is literally the minute I try to stop, the disease is throwing a justification into my brain. And then if that one doesn't work, he throws another one. And by the third one, yeah, okay, last time. You're right, right? Last time. And so by the time I got to New York, or by the time I got back to Mass and I signed myself out of Foxwoods and Mohegan, I know I have a problem. But my buddy, shout out to Noah, he brings me to Foxwoods and Mohegan to sign myself out. Of course, I have to play the last time, right? And I have to videotape it and like make a joke out of it almost. Like
mm,
I said that, I think the modern meeting, I think the podcast is kind of born out of the same thing where it's like, I've always been a ham. I've always wanted to do something like this. And so, yeah, I'm literally signing myself out at Foxwoods and he's like secretly videotaping me. And I'm thinking I'm going to make this like movie out of it. And I never do. So now I'm living in Boston and I can't go to these two other casinos. And now the focus is on my jobs, right? Now I'm bouncing job to job. It's not me. It's not the addict. It's my boss, or it's I'm not making enough money, or a better opportunity. And so eventually I start working at Twin River, which was a casino in Rhode Island. And part of the reason why I did that is because I didn't want to gamble, right? So I'm still playing Keno, still playing poker, but now I'm banned from the two Connecticut casinos and I work at the Rhode Island one. So I get nowhere to play. And that worked for like a year. And then I said, well, you know, I really miss New York. And at no point did I admit the fact that like I miss New York because I can't gamble anywhere up here, right? So after not even 2 years in Mass, I moved back to New York and I'm there 3 months. And I'm in AC, of course, and I'm laying in my bed, broke at Harris. I'll never forget. And I get a phone call from a Las Vegas number, and I'm like, what? What's this? So I don't answer. It's a voicemail from Aria Resort Casino asking if I want to come out and audition to be a poker dealer. And I'm like, how the fuck? Like, who is this? Like, what's going on? And I remember that 2 years prior, I had applied to a bunch of casinos to be a poker dealer for the World Series. And this is like May of 2017 or April of 2017. I'm like, you know what? This is what I need. I need to work in the industry and I need to go to the mecca of the industry. And I've obviously like, I'm going to gamble no matter where I am. This is the disease, by the way. I'm going to gamble no matter where I am. So I might as well like be in a city that I'm going to have a ton of opportunities and its cost of living is way cheaper and the weather's nice. And you know what? Like, I need a fresh start. That was my thing towards the end. I need a fresh start. And then 6 months later, now I need a fresher start, right? And so I end up, and this is one of my rock bottoms looking back, is so I take the audition, I go out to Aria. I have nothing at this point. I'm living day to day as a bartender in New York City. I go out there with like $300. I had just enough money to pay for the flight. I got a comped room hotel because I was a degenerate. I go out there with $300. I get there on like a Thursday. The audition is the next Friday afternoon. Thursday night, I go down. I'm staying at the Link, I believe. I go down and play Keno. And sure enough, I hit like 5 out of 5 and I win like 3 grand. Okay. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm here for the next day and a half. I have 3 grand. I can do whatever I want. I cannot wait to live here this summer. I get to crush this audition. This is going to be amazing. Like, I'm definitely going to, I'm texting my friends, telling them I hit 3K. And of course, what does everyone say? Make sure you come home with something. I'm like, obviously, it's 3 grand. I'm not going to not come home. I came out here at 300. I just 10x'd my money. I go to bed with the 3 grand. I wake up, go to the audition. After the audition, I'm floating out of Aria. I crushed the audition. I know I'm getting the job offer. I mean, I don't know, but I know. And I'm like, and now you got one night in Vegas to just do whatever you want. You want to go play 20-40 hold'em? You want to go put 1,000 on a craps table? You still got two grand left. Let's go. Mm-hmm. Lost everything. Yeah. Lost 3 grand. Lost, and I can remember going home, and people telling me, oh, so you had a big hit in Vegas. Oh yeah, no, it was awesome. Yeah. What'd you leave with? I left with half. And then another person, I left with 1,000. My parents, I left with 2 grand. So it was in that moment where I was like, that was the first time I had ever won a lot and gave it all back. That was the one, to answer your earlier question. If I won, I usually left with, if I won a lot, I'm saying, like, if I won like 5K or more, I would leave with something. This was the first time that I won a large amount and gave it all back in like 8 hours. And so that, to me, that was scary. It obviously didn't stop me. I ended up getting the job. I ended up going out to Vegas in May of 2017. That was when I drove out cross country for the first time. It's the second of my rock bottoms. So my buddy was with me from New York to Chicago, and then from Chicago to Vegas, I was on my own. If this isn't the disease, I don't know what is. If this isn't like, if doesn't scare someone who's listening to this, my buddy gets on a plane. I drive 30 minutes by myself, and I find a casino in Council Bluffs, Iowa. And I have $1,500 to start my life in Vegas. It was all on the craps table within 10 minutes. This is after I told myself, like, I'm only going to spend 200. I'm just going to try to hit something. If that guy sevens out, I'm broke in Iowa with 3 more days of driving, 3 more days worth of gas that I can't pay for, 3 more days of hotels that I can't pay for. And this has actually happened to me a lot over the course of my gambling. He hit a hard 6 and I had $150 on it, and I got bailed out. I walked out of that casino after gambling for like 2 hours. I walked out of there like up $10. Yeah. But I will never forget this. I'm in my car. It's pouring raining. I'm thinking it's going to be like a monsoon or a tornado because I'm in fucking Iowa. And I, for the first time in a long time, in that 2-year period between Boston and New York, I was fighting back against the disease. And I literally was like crying in my car, wanting to turn around. Like, and I almost did. I really almost did. I was like, dude, you cannot do this. Like, you can't even get to Vegas without blowing your money. What would have happened if that guy did not roll that hard 6? I call my dad and I say, Dad, I fucked up. Like, I'm in Iowa and I have no money. I should have called him. If I called him, he wouldn't have given, in that moment, he probably wouldn't have given me money. He would have given me a plane ticket or sent me money to drive home. That was, I think that moment was like the beginning of Act 3 of my gambling.
If your gambling starting to feel less like fun and more like stress, trust me, you're not alone. Millions of us know what it's like to say, just one more bet, or feel that urge that's really difficult to explain to someone else. That's why I'm so excited to tell you about the sponsor of today's video, eVive. Think of it as having a recovery companion right in your pocket. Someone that knows exactly what you're going through. No lectures, no pressure, just genuine support without judgment, right when you need it. If you download eVive right now, you'll get guaranteed free access through 2026. Not a trial or some limited version. but the entire platform. Because Evive believes that anyone that's out there that's struggling should get the support that they need. Download Evive today and take the first step towards redefining your relationship to gambling. Evive's only available in select countries. Check the description of this video to download now. It reminds me of the story of the last day that I gambled. Was when you say bailed out by a hard six on a craps table. So for those that don't know, that's when you roll 2 threes, and it's like a specific proposition bet that you can make on the table. But I had taken out like cash advances. I maxed out a couple credit cards the last day I gambled, and at one point, like 7 hours into a session, I was like, I hate this. Like I want this to end, kind of maybe subliminally in the back of my head. And I put down like a stack of chips like this high on the field, and I was like, I hate this. Like, fuck this. I hope I lose. And I turn around and I start to walk away. And then he goes, 12 midnight. And I go, oh. I
Two
was
to
like,
one.
oh. So I basically at that point I'd gotten back to even. And of course I kept going and lost all the money that I had come with. But, the feeling of like, was there any kind of inkling in you that like it almost would have been better if you had lost that day,
Of
even back
course.
then?
Oh my God, of course. I mean, so I can remember, like I said, once I was out in the open of my gambling, that's when in the last like 5 years, I would say, a lot of people started giving their 2 cents, right? Family, friends, trying to just convince me. But very quickly, what I realized once I got into recovery is that we can talk till we're blue in the face. I can tell my story and more. I can tell the hardest parts of my story to a compulsive gambler out there. But if they're not ready, they're not ready. Like that's the
Yeah.
bottom line, and that's the hard truth, and that's something that I struggle with every day when I'm on the podcast and I'm talking to people, and how do these people not like I'm a real person. I'm telling you that I went through this, and I am describing in my brain, and you're telling me that you've done the same thing. So like this is the only way this ends, baby. Like, you know what I mean? But if someone tried talking to me 4 years ago, 8 years ago, 10 years ago, I wasn't ready, right? Like it wouldn't have mattered. I'll never forget when I had we'll get to this craps roll that I had, but I turned $150 into 15,000 in 20 minutes. At that time, I wiped my debt, which was all 10 or 12 of friends and family that I borrowed money from and coworkers. And I will never forget my aunt Kathy. She said, I almost think it's probably worse that you won that. And I was like, how do you figure? Like, I'm debt free, I'm debt free. And she's like, okay, we'll see. And obviously she was right. That was in 2018. So I had another 4 years of misery before.
Wow.
Yeah.
Take us there. So you leave Iowa and you still have the money. You got out by the skin of your teeth. You get to Vegas, and what do you begin doing for work?
Yeah. So I start working at Aria. I'm a poker dealer at Aria. And for the first 2 months, it's the World Series. The town is buzzing. I also like picked up part-time at the World Series, which I ended up quitting because it was just brutal. It was like grave shift and it was awful because I wanted to deal the tournaments, but I was just dealing cash games on grave shift. So I worked at Aria. Everything was pretty good. Now, the thing part of my pitch that convinced people that it was a good idea to do this was I'm not paying rent for the first 2 months I'm out there because I have so many comped rooms. I mapped it out. So for like the 55 days of the World Series or whatever it was that I was guaranteed shifts at Aria, I had a free hotel room for like 48 of them. And the other days I would get like an Airbnb. So like all in, it was going to cost me like $500 a month to live out there. And I'm a big hotel guy, love hotels. So I'm telling them, no, I don't have to pay utilities, don't do this, don't do that. So I'm out there first 2 months. Spoiler alert, I can't keep money in my pocket because I don't have any overhead really. So I'm making money at Aria, and there are some nights where I don't even get back to my hotel room before it's gone. But of course, at the end of the 2 months, they selected me to be a year-round employee. I accepted, very excited. I ended up getting an apartment. The next year was just absolute. It wasn't even chaos because like I feel like there has to be like noise for chaos. Like I was alone in an apartment. I never even bought a bed. There was an air mattress. I had one of those like brown plastic, but they kind of look nice tables from Walmart for like $50. That was my kitchen table. And I lived out there for a year, and I did nothing but work 3 days a week at Aria once the series was over. And then I would gamble, usually so Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday were my days off. By Friday, I was broke every weekend. And if I couldn't borrow money from someone, I just did nothing. Or I would wait for like a $15 or $20 free play to hit my account. And I'd drive 25. So I was 25 minutes northwest of the strip at this point. I would drive to the strip, play that free play. Sometimes I would run it up. But like that was my life. Like you'd see me on a Friday night at like Harrah's in shorts and flip flops and a t-shirt, just misery at a Keno slot, you know. Going back to what I said initially, I'm living that double life. When I set foot in Aria, I'm bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and I'm a good dealer, and managers like me, and they start taking notice, and I eventually get promoted to I'm a dual rate. So for those who don't know, that means like some days I'm a floor person, come in the suit. You know, if I always laugh when I worked in the industry that, you know, I'm in a suit, right? And I look fairly sharp, whatever. It's no big deal. But the minute I get out of there, it's like I'm a bum. You know what I mean? Like I don't own a pair of jeans during this period. Like I'm just wearing shorts and a t-shirt outside of there, but like then I'm wearing the suit. It's just funny. I'm doing good at Aria. And now so the other thing in my life, and to this day I still struggle with it, is like I'm always looking for that next big thing, right? So I'm at Aria. It's obviously not going well outside of Aria, but at Aria I'm doing well. But now I'm hearing of Springfield, Mass is opening a casino, opening MGM. And at Aria, you couldn't get full-time status because in Vegas back then, probably still the same way, it's just really hard to get any industry in Vegas, in the casino industry or the food and beverage, because nobody ever leaves because the jobs are just so good. And the benefits are good and the union and all this stuff. So I eventually accept the position to be a full-time floor at MGM Springfield. So for those of us keeping score, so I went from New York to Boston to Vegas. Now I'm going to Western Mass. So I go to Western Mass, and within 3 or 4 months, I go from a floor at MGM Springfield to a shift manager. So now I'm running a shift at a brand new poker room. You know, I have like a staff of 40 or 50 people. But my gambling has never been worse. It's absolutely never been worse. I start borrowing from my subordinates. I start, you know, fraternizing. I just a mess. And it was a morning in 2018. I went to that craps table, and so at this point, I'm walking around on my phone with a list of like 10 or 12 people that I owe anywhere from 200 to 2,000 to, and it was like $13,000 that I owed 10 or 12 different people. And I was at Twin River. It was like 5 a.m. Mind you, from Springfield to Twin River, it was like a 2 hour drive. So I would drive like 2 hours because I'm still banned from Fox's Mohegan at this point. I can't go there. And I had $150 after another marathon night of like slots and roulette and craps and whatever. And I see this craps table. It's like two guys at a craps table, right at the craps table, right when you walk into Twin River. And I'm like, all right, you know what? I was always the guy who I would love to die by like 1,000 small bets. You know, I always wanted to make it last. I'm like, you know what? I had like 6 green chips in my hand. I'm like, you know what? Let's just go for it, right? And me and this guy that I was working with at Springfield at the time, we had this system. Now, those who are about to hear this, I am not. This system does not work. Okay, it worked for me.
Just to preface that.
It worked for me one time, and what I will tell you is that once this system worked in this one time in 2018, I spent the next 3.5 years chasing the system, and it brought me to fucking Gamblers Anonymous. Okay, so just to preface that. So long story short, we said you take a $25 chip, you put it on the hard 6, $25 chip on the hard 8. If it hits, you parlay it. You go to 200 or you go to 200 or 250. If that hits, you go to 500. If that hits, you go to 1,000. And you could roughly make like 15,000. If you could ever hit 4 hard ways in a row, and obviously you want to be hedging the soft 6 and the soft 8. So I do that. I go to the table. I say $30 6, $30 8, hard 6, hard 8, quarter, quarter. Like maybe the first roll, the guy throws a hard 8. I'm like, all right, make it 200, press the 8. 3 rolls later, Heart rate. Ooh, okay, all right, 1,800 bucks. Ooh, blood's flowing.
Mm-hmm.
That's gonna put a nice little dent in that thing. And of course, me like just being an idiot. I already told the dealers what my system was. I already said what I was gonna do. So the stick man's like, you gotta do 500. I'm like, okay, and I throw the $300 chips in. Now it's $500 in a heart rate. For context, everybody, people do $5 on a heart rate or $10. I'm doing $500 on a heart rate. This guy, me, I could barely afford the gas to get to Springfield. Right, I'm running this poker room in Springfield, and I have $500 on a heart eight, and now I have like 508. He throws another heart eight almost immediately. So now it's serious. Now I have like 5 grand in front of me, and now it's like this is not life changing money by any means, but this is like I can really do some good with this money. And I can remember like being very anxious and being like, you got to do it though. You got to do one more. So I put $1,000 in the hard eight, and then he starts rolling numbers, and so I start sprinkling in everything. At this point, I have probably 3 grand on the table, plus another 5 or 6 in front of me. And I told him, I'm like, I held up a purple chip. I said, if you throw one more hard eight, my friend, I'm giving you this $500 chip. Motherfucker throws another hard eight. And I turned $150. I cashed out like 15,900, and I was crying. I not in front of them, but like I was crying walking to the cage. And whenever I had a big hit, I always would call my parents right away. Always call my parents. And you know, so many times I called them and I would tell them this, and then 2 days later, it's radio silence, and they know that I fucked up and I spent it all. But this time I told my dad, I said, I'm calling you now because there's this list on my phone. I want to pay everyone off. Don't let me not pay everyone off. And he's like, all right, well, you need to go to the bank. You need to deposit, blah, blah, blah. And I did that, right? Now, one little wrinkle in the story, the scumbag that I was at the time, I started calling all of my friends and coworkers and family. I started calling them like they were fucking credit card companies. I started negotiating. I didn't tell them I hit, right? I said, hey, came into a little money. I know I owe you 1,200. Like, I know I've been paying you like $100 a week. Like, if I gave you like 800 today, like, would you take that? And like, we're just square. I'm really sorry, but like, blah, blah, blah. And of course, everyone's like, of course, Ad, like, no problem.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so I ended up paying back everyone, and it was like 12, 13,000. So I had 2,000 left for myself. 6 months later, not even. Not only was that list back, some people that were on the list before were on it again, but I found new people, almost $20,000 again. For the next 3.5 years until I got help, I was chasing that role again. And it never happened, obviously.
And if it had, you still might be out there gambling at this point.
Oh,
So
yeah. No, and that's what I tell everybody, especially like, I answer the hotline. If someone calls 1-800-GAMBLER, like in the New England area, I answer the hotline. And sometimes people will be like, yeah, but, if I just hit this, I would quit, blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, bud, trust me. I've hit a Buffalo machine for $1,000, like the number you see at the top of the screen. I hit that. I've had these craps rolls. I've won poker tournaments. I said, it all goes back. It doesn't matter. We cannot gamble normally, right? We are powerless over this disease. It doesn't matter. Like, even if you won the fucking lottery, it's all going back eventually. You might buy nice things with it. You might buy a house. You might take care of people. In 3 or 4 years, after you're done with your bullshit and done with all your gambling, you're going to have to give that house back, and you're going to have to give everything back because you lost everything.
yeah, I always say that like wins are future losses. It's just really hard to explain that to someone that hasn't had the losses yet.
For
So
sure.
a major part of like the goal here on my platform is like, at first I was like, you guys shouldn't gamble. You're going to lose. It's bad. And then everyone would just like say, you suck at gambling. Let's stop talking. And so
Oh,
the
that's
the kind
good.
of like the goal has shifted to be like this. So if I was to draw out a map of my gambling, it was like win, bigger loss, win, bigger loss, win, bigger loss, and it would trail downwards. So I try to find people that are on that downswing, and I hope that this is how they discover videos, like ideally. They're on that downswing and they're thinking, maybe this isn't a good thing. Maybe I was wrong about this. Maybe this is a bad idea. Because eventually, if they keep going, they're going to have a win that convinces them that everything's going to work out. But if you find people that are on that downswing when like reality is actually hitting, I
Mm.
think that's like your chance to really make an impact. At this point in the story, you've paid people back, you've gone further into debt again. The cycle seems to be repeating itself. Do you change location again? And if so, is that what actually ends up helping you?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So not only do I take, not only do I change location, but guess where I go back to? I go back to Vegas.
Mm,
And this time it's honestly for the same reasons I went the first time. So I'm in Mass. I still can't go to Foxwoods or Mohegan. And so I was at Springfield, and now, looking back on it, learning what I've learned in 12-step meetings, my ego was out of control at this point. And so like I had a really good thing going at MGM Springfield. Like I was a, fairly successful shift manager. I had the respect of my team. I had the respect of my boss. I didn't necessarily there was one other shift manager who I never saw eye to eye with, and literally he was a one of the main reasons why I ended up leaving.
mm,
And just the idea of my boss moving on and him getting the job over me, I just said, in my egomaniac addict mind, I was like, he's gonna get it, and like I don't want that's bullshit. I could never work for him. Blah 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 blah. So
mm,
and then in my mind, I'm like, I'm not leaving this job because I'm gonna stay within MGM, and I'm gonna apply for this job posting that I just saw at Aria for a full time floor. So, I was there before as a dual rate working 3 days a week. Now I could be a full time floor. I could be like on my way to climb the ladder of MGM, because at this point, like, I still had hope that I could, work in the industry and like climb the ladder. So now this is in February of 2020. So I had the good luck of moving out to Vegas a month before a global pandemic hits. So once I'm out to Vegas, um, I'm not gonna lie to you, like I loved the pandemic because I did nothing and got paid for it. And I will never forget when it was like May or June of 2020, after all that money started building in my account. And I was playing WSOP Nevada though, and I was like, all of a sudden, to answer your earlier question, this is the one point when I thought I could possibly be a professional poker player, because I literally
mm,
went on this crazy run where I actually like won a tournament, like an online tournament with like 1,000 people. Like I won it. And then like I had like a couple top three finishes. Like I had spun just from playing tournaments. I had spun like $100 into like 6 or 7 thousand
mm,
playing online poker during the pandemic. And the casinos opened back up in May or June. Now I had not been in a casino in like 3 months, and I can remember telling my roommates like, I think this is it. I feel great. I don't want to go back. I've seen what life is like. I want to get healthy. I want to get back to work, and my gambling itch is just going to be online poker, and I'm
mm,
just going to play tournaments, and that's it. And then we got, like, we saw in the news that like Aliante Casino off the strip is opening, like the first casino to open at midnight on June 1st or whatever it was. And this was like a week before. And then I go on a bad run in poker. And then I go on a really bad run, and I go to cash games and I play like way over my head, and I lose all 6 grand. Obviously, it's gone. And now all of a sudden it's like May 30th, and I say to my roommate, hey, maybe we should go like June 1st, just check it out. And he's like, yeah, no, definitely. Like, and at this point, they knew of me. They did not know the seriousness of my problem.
mm.
And at this point, I had the stimulus money, I had the unemployment, I had all this money sitting in my bank account. I'm a numbers guy. I mean, I know the numbers don't matter, but like, for my story, it's, I just think it gives context. So like, I had like the most money I've ever had in my life at one point, like liquid money. It was like $14,000, like in my from COVID, $14,000 just sitting in my bank account. that first weekend, I lost $14,000 once the casinos opened. And this was when 7 days earlier I was telling myself like I'm not going to gamble. Like I think I'm done with the casinos. And so from there, I lasted a few months, and now leading that double life, I also never get a job that I don't interview for. And I'm in Aria, and now I got to wear a mask, and it's not the same. Floors aren't getting tipped the way they used to get tipped in the Ivy Room. I hate it. I don't like my roommates. Like even though they're like salt of the earth guys, I love them. Shout out Skylar and Norris. But like at that point, I was just so mad. And I see this job opening for a shift manager at MGM National Harbor, which is like one of the highest revenue generating poker rooms in the country. And of course, I had some like I knew someone who had worked there who like kind of was like giving me the play by play. They told me like 10 people applied for it. I made the final three, and then I got the job offer. I'm literally interviewing via Zoom, like, without a pot to piss in. And I just, I get the job, and they give me a relocation package. And I'm, and now this has to be it. Cause now my dad, my friends, everyone is like, you need help, or you keep jumping job to job. Like when is something going to stick? Right. And so now I have to be like, it's going to stick. This is it. This is why, this is why, this is why, and this is why, I'm going to be DC. It's going to be great. I'm going to live in Alexandria. I already found a place. It's going to be great, 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 great. And it's just the same bullshit, like I start gambling. I start borrowing from subordinates. And one of those subordinates, I borrowed a large amount of money from, paid him back. But before I could pay him back fully, someone heard something who told HR, and then HR calls me like, have you ever borrowed money from someone? Of course I deny. And, they put me on a PIP, performance improvement plan. And before I could do it, I just left. That was the darkest. That was like the last year. And like, to your point earlier, I would be at Horseshoe Baltimore, which is probably the most depressing casino I've ever been in.
Yeah.
And I, oh yeah, you're a DC guy, right? And I'd be getting hand pays like stone faced. I could give a fuck. Like I just hit $3,000. Okay.
You lost all
Because
the joy for it by the end.
because not only did I lose the joy for it, Rob, but like the number, right? Like because for years I'd be like, I had a number in my head of like how to get to even and stop, right? Maybe it was 50,000, maybe it was 100,000. At this point in 2021, I had probably lost $500,000 in the 20 years, maybe more. People ask me all the time, and I don't know, but it has to be at least $500,000, maybe more, right? And even like, and towards the end, when I had that numb feeling, win or lose, I knew that like even if I hit the biggest of big jackpots, that doesn't even put a dent in that $500,000, right? And so the jig was up at Harbor. I was going to lose my job most likely. And so the last place I moved to was Austin, Texas. And that was to work at a poker room down there. Once again, the justification for that was I'm moving to Austin. I'm going to work in this poker room. It's great money down there. I have a few friends down there who are already there. And there's not a casino within 4 hours. So I'm good. There's not a casino within 4 hours. And for 6 months, I was good. And my love of hotels, I ended up living in a Holiday Inn Express with like a suite. Don't ask me how I got it, but I got it for like $50 a night. And it was awesome because like apartments I was looking for down there were like 1,500. So I'm like, I'm paying 1,500 and I get my towels and I get continental breakfast every morning. And, I was living off of microwave meals. But other than that, it was awesome. And for 6 months, I lived in that hotel. I worked in the poker room. And the plan was I'm sending my money to my dad. And the number was 50K. And I was making ridiculous money at this poker room. If I worked a full shift, I could make like 500-600 like in 8 hours. And so I told my dad, I said, I'm going to send you money. Once we hit 50K, I'm coming home. I'm going to GA, starting my life over. At like the 5.5, 6 month mark, I'd probably sent him like maybe like 12K. Not as much as I could have, right? Because I'm still betting sports. I'm still playing poker at the poker room, but I'm not going to casinos. NFC Championship game, Rams 49ers 2022. I had a fairly big bet on the Niners. I never, ever bet the underdog. I was always the guy who bet the favorite and the over, like the rest of us. And they were winning outright, like in the third quarter. They end up losing. I had a few drinks, and I pull out my phone and I look at the nearest casino, and it's WinStar, and it's like 4.5 hours away. So like at 11 o'clock on a Sunday night, January 30th, I drove 4.5 hours from Austin, Texas to Oklahoma in the middle of the night by myself, half drunk. And I spent the next like 36 hours in WinStar. I lost every penny I could get my hands on that I hadn't sent to my dad. I borrowed from 4 coworkers that I barely knew. I was doing the Venmo tricks. I was doing the PayPal tricks. I lost thousands. And I can remember halfway through that session, I was like, this is it. But if this is it, like we're going down fighting. Like we're going for it, right? And like I said, not even if I won, it wouldn't have mattered. And I can remember being in a parking lot in like 5 minutes away from the casino. I went to get gas and some combos and a red Gatorade and chocolate covered pretzels. That was my go-to loser meal. I had this feeling wash over me, and I don't know what it was. And I know sometimes when people hear this, they roll their eyes, but I'm telling you, like I had this feeling, this like wash over me, and I was done. I was tired of the lying, tired of the cheating, tired of the stealing, tired of the borrowing, tired of just living this life. And I wanted, I didn't want to take my own life, but I was tired of this life that I had. So I looked up a 12-step meeting in Austin. It was on a Tuesday. It was the following Tuesday. I remember going in, and it was so weird. My buddy Phil came with me. Shout out Phil. He was a solid dude. He was with me that night. We were drinking the Coronas, watching the 49ers game. And it was so weird to walk into the room. And, I walked in thinking that like it was going to be like what I saw in the bus Port Authority, right? And you walk in, and I look to my left, and there's like, 2 like beautiful women in their like 30s. And then I look to my right, and there's like 3 young guys like dressed nice, and I'm the schlubbiest guy in the room, like I'm the Port Authority guy. Right? And like and they're all compulsive gamblers. They're all there to get help. They're all part of the fellowship, and they're all coming up to me, shaking my hand, eye contact, congratulating me. I'm like, congratulating? Well, what? For what? And then when we open that literature, and it's like it was written for me. I can't explain what it was like to not only read that literature for the first time, but then to just hear everyone's story, right? Hear someone's story that they overdrafted their account 50 times, that they went to the ATM a million times in the casino. Like, they had done the PayPal trick that I had done. Like I was walking around subconsciously, like thinking that I was alone, that I was just this fucking degenerate loser. That when you walk into a room and you meet these strangers and they've all done the same thing, like that gives you hope, right? And I will never forget those guys. Like I was there for 3 weeks until I ultimately moved back up east, northeast, and I started my road to recovery. But those people in Austin, the Tuesday night meeting in Austin, they saved my life without a doubt.
And I know that it was Tuesday, February the 8th, because that was my original last bet date.
Come on, dude. That's
Yeah,
crazy.
it was. It
Oh
was. I
my
remember.
God.
I mean, your story ended a lot more peacefully than mine did. The first time I went to a meeting, I felt great. I had the same like emotion of like it's nice to be around people that understand me. But I went home and I spun slots until 11:59 p.m.
Wow.
because I knew that my last bet was that morning. Then I went to a meeting and I was like, well, this is my last chance. So even after feeling that way, I still kept going. But it eventually did end up doing the trick, along with what I do now for work, which is this content. In your case, you're starting the podcast pretty recently. How long has it been around?
Yeah, so we started November 11th, 2024. So it's been a little over 6 months.
Awesome. And how's the experience been thus far in terms of, how has it helped your recovery to talk about your story and to talk to other people about theirs?
Yeah, so thank you for asking. And when I started the Modern Meeting, the idea was that, you know, I'm the youngest guy in every room I go in by like 30 years, yet I'm seeing these commercials. I'm answering the hotline. And half the time, the people who call the hotline, it's parents of young people.
Hmm.
So it's like, how do we get more of these young people in these meetings? And I said, well, let's bring the meeting to them, So that's why I started the pod. And very quickly, as I was deciding what to do, like I didn't want to keep it to just gambling. Obviously, that's where my struggles are. But we have on people, with alcohol, with opiates, with drugs, with everything, sex, everything. The biggest takeaway I've taken from the podcast so far is that it's amazing how no matter the substance, we all share very similar, we have similar paths, we have similar ways that we're recovering, and also like similar triggers as far as like the addiction.
Mhm.
And you think it's powerful when you go into a room of compulsive gamblers and you hear their story. It's pretty powerful too as a compulsive gambler when I hear the story of an alcoholic or a drug addict, and we can say like, oh my god, yes, I did that too, I did that too. And so it's been amazing to be able to, obviously, I 3 years and 4 months clean, I still get emotional, which I think it's just because I have 20 years of guilt and 20 years of pain that I'm still just carrying around. Like, so I'm not going to be able to just, all you guys that like public speak and like go on these conferences and stuff. It's like, I don't know. I don't know how I could do it without getting emotional, but eventually, hopefully I can. But yeah, I'm still working the steps. I have an amazing sponsor, and I feel like I'm definitely obviously like doing a lot of step 12 work with the podcast, but I'm also kind of doing a walking step 4 because I start every episode with a cold open of my story, and it started. So episode 1 was basically what I just told you about the parking lot in Oklahoma, and then we go back to the beginning, and I tell my story in chronological order, and we're at episode 28, just aired today, and we're still only like in 2017. So like I'm taking my time with it. It's a long story when I really break it down. But no, it's been amazing. The people I've met, I mean, just getting to be here. Thank you again.
Yeah.
It's just been amazing, and people like Christina and Brian Hatch and Kitty and like all these people that I've met so far, like it's just been amazing, and I just can't wait to continue to meet people and just I look at us as like we're obviously all in this together, and you know, I, I love the fact that like, it's not a competition. We're all looking to have each other on each other's pods, and I just, cause that's what we need. Like we need, gambling is a beast, but it's getting crazy now. Like just
Yeah.
with all the backing and how it's just so normalized, like us in the recovery space, like we need to get on the offensive, you know what I mean? And we need to really, exactly what you're doing basically, and just what all of us are doing, and we just got to keep going. And that's, like I told you before we went on air, like I love, I obviously still have a day job and I'm still, grinding, but like I could spend every day for the rest of my life working in recovery and be so happy. You know what I mean? Like it's just like you can't put a price tag on that.
No. And I always say that, kind of like step 12, it's a similar idea. We're most qualified to help the people that we used to be.
Yeah.
And so I think that what you're doing is an awesome thing. And I want to just thank you one more time for coming on here and sharing a bit of your story because I didn't know it was going to take 35 episodes to tell your story, but
Yeah.
I wish you well with it. So, Adam, thank you again for being on. I really appreciate it. To anyone in the audience that wants to hear another story of someone in recovery from a gambling addiction, watch this video next and let's keep getting better together, one day at a time.